listening to the Pro Bono Happy Hour. I'm Rena Glazer. Welcome. Today our guest is Leah Medway from Perkins Coie. Leah spoke to us from Seattle, where she is based. We discussed her career and role at the firm, its pro bono program, the theme of pro bono clients searching for a home in all of its meanings, a documentary short film about one of the firm's pro bono clients called The Chance for a New Life, and more. We hope you enjoy our conversation. Hi, Leah. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, hello, and thank you for having me.
Let's jump right in. To get started, could you tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, where you went to school, things like that?
Sure. How much time do you have?
Endless time. It's a podcast.
Okay. Well, I have moved around quite a bit, so I will try to give you the short version. I was born in New York, which is where my family is from. My parents are both academics, or at least they became academics, which caused us to move around a bit. So I lived in Indiana for a bit when I was young and ended up moving to California, and I grew up in Los Angeles, California. And then I went back east to college. I went to Tufts University in Boston for undergraduate. I took a couple of years after college where I was a paralegal, which I will credit my experience as a paralegal in D.C. with sort of helping me know that I wanted to become a lawyer. And then I went to law school at University of Virginia, which was a great experience. And I then went to a law firm in Washington, D.C., and I worked at a couple of different law firms as a corporate lawyer before ultimately finding my way to the pro bono world.
Well, let's circle back to why you became a lawyer. You said you spent time as a paralegal, and that helped solidify your decision. But what else? What other factors went into the calculus and motivated you to become a lawyer?
I think it's one of those things that I knew for a long time. When I was growing up, I was a pretty serious dancer. So for me, it was either I was going to become a professional dancer or I was going to become a lawyer. I think that probably came from the fact that my father is a law professor. So I grew up sort of surrounded by him and all his friends and a lot of people in the law world. And I liked to argue a lot with him and other people. And so I figured it would be something that I was good at. And so it was sort of something that was always in the back of my mind. But when I graduated college, I wasn't quite ready to go there. I wanted a little time to work and to just figure things out. And so that's why I took a break and worked as a paralegal.
That makes total sense. Let's talk about how you got to Perkins Coie. How'd you end up there?
I was working in Washington, D.C., and I took a little bit of a break when my children were young, and at that time, my husband, who was a partner in a law firm in Washington, D.C., got a job in-house here in Seattle. And so that had us move all the way across the country from one Washington to the other. And so I found myself here in this Washington where I hadn't gone to school and I didn't really know a lot of people, and I was just trying to create a network and figure out what I could do as far as going back to work. And ultimately, that led me to Perkins Coie. It was actually kind of funny. I was doing a lot of networking, and I was just reaching out to figure out what jobs there might be. Would I work for a foundation? Would I work for a nonprofit? And I reached out to the then pro bono counsel at Perkins Coie because I figured she would be pretty well connected and would know a lot of people. And I went to meet with her, and she said it was great timing that I reached out to her because she had just that morning posted a position because she was leaving and they were hiring a new pro bono counsel.
Serendipity. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. And I wasn't even looking necessarily for a pro bono counsel position. I had done that in D.C. before when I worked at Piper. And I knew I wanted to be sort of in the sphere of doing public interest work, but I thought, well, maybe I'll do something different. And so I wasn't necessarily looking for one of these jobs. I know how infrequently they come up. So yeah, it really was serendipity, but that's how I ended up here.
Yeah, that's amazing, which also makes it hard to give job advice because it's hard to say, right? You can depend on networking and boom, I'll follow my story. But
well, I mean, I would, yes. I mean, it did work out for me in that sense, but I would say that I worked pretty hard networking to
Yeah.
really meet a lot of people in the community. And I think that helped me. And I regularly meet with people who are interested in jobs such as a pro bono counsel position. And I do talk to them a lot about just positioning yourself by being in the community and getting to know people, because a lot of times these jobs will come up before they're officially posted. So I still do think the networking can help.
Yeah, I agree. It's a people business. So you mentioned thinking about things that might be of interest to you, working in the public interest, joining the pro bono community, which you have done. What do you think sparked your passion for pro bono and access to justice?
Well, when I was a paralegal between college and law school, I regularly volunteered at legal clinics, and I remember at that time being struck by just the huge needs in the community and how even as a paralegal, there were things I could do to help people just to identify legal issues and even point them in the right direction. I wasn't giving legal advice at the time. And I would say that throughout law school, I wasn't necessarily focused on it. I mean, I think it was in the back of my mind, but I had decided I wanted to be a corporate lawyer. And so I was really more focused on that. But when I got to my first firm, I don't think I'd been there very long before somebody said, hey, will you go to a clinic and will you sort of get involved in pro bono? And I said, yes, because I thought that's what I should do. And so I dove in and I handled a huge pro bono case when I was a first-year lawyer. And even though I was a corporate lawyer, it was a litigation matter. It was a custody dispute. And so I think for me, I just early on decided that it was something that I wanted to do. I mean, part of it, I think, was that I felt it was an ethical obligation, but part of it was just I enjoyed it and I got meaning out of it. And so I think for me, it wasn't, I mean, I hear some stories for people that they knew from the beginning that they wanted to go into this. And for me, it was something that I came upon. And I would say as I started doing pro bono work as a lawyer, I became more and more familiar with all of the needs out there in the community and how a lot of people really did not have an ability to access the justice system. And so through my work as a pro bono volunteer attorney, I became really committed to access to justice issues. And of course, more so over the years as I've turned my career into this.
Well, thank you for sharing. I think that's a really relatable experience where I think a lot of people's passions often get turned on by their experiences. It's not necessarily the idea or an image or something very abstract that got them. It's, as you say, concrete meaning and being helpful. And the more they dive in, the more they realize it suits them. And so I think that's an interesting pathway. And thank you for sharing. Before we dive in more to your role and the firm, let's talk a little bit about Seattle. What's the pro bono and access to justice culture like in Seattle?
Seattle is actually really great in this regard. We have a really great culture here in Seattle. It's somewhat small, and it's an incredibly collaborative community. And I actually just spent the weekend in Yakima, Washington, sort of in the middle of the state, at the Washington Access to Justice Conference. And so I have that experience very fresh on my mind. And I really came away from that just feeling incredibly proud of our state and our community. So it's not just Seattle, but Washington in general. I think there's a real commitment to providing civil legal aid and to justice. And the Access to Justice Board just unveiled a new state plan for the coordinated delivery of civil legal aid to low-income people. And really, statewide, they're looking hard at ways to expand access to our civil justice system and how to identify and eliminate barriers that perpetuate poverty and deny justice to people. So I think, for me, I feel really proud of the community here and all the things that they've done. And there's not a lot of us here doing this work full time, at least from the law firm side, but we are very close.
Are there particular areas of poverty law or pressing legal need that stand out, or is it everything all the time? Are there things that you think in the communities there that have sort of percolated to the top?
Yeah, well, I think in some ways we are similar to the rest of the country in that at least in the past several months, immigration needs have really percolated to the top. And so there's a real focus on helping the immigrant community. We have a really large community here. And so I would say that has been an area of focus I've seen. But even before that, a couple of years ago, they did a civil legal needs study here in Washington. And they really found that just civil legal aid is under attack. And they came out with some interesting statistics there. And one of the things that they saw was that while low-income people in general have a large number of civil legal needs, one population in particular that really had a lot of need was in the domestic violence area, and that survivors of domestic violence were experiencing considerably more legal needs, even if it's not DV-related, just they had more needs than other people. So I'd say that's another area that I've seen here.
And it's wonderful. We talked a little bit about this with Julie Orr, but in response to identifying a need, then the community has gotten together, rallied, and built programs to address them. So that I think is another testament to how amazing the community is there, that you're able to do the investigation and identify critical legal needs and then address them. So it's an amazing model.
Yeah, and I'm seeing that not just in domestic violence, but in other areas, and really just having come from the Access to Justice Conference, there's a lot of that. It's just really looking out there and seeing what the needs are. And the way, normally, for example, this conference focuses on civil legal aid, but this time there were a number of people on the criminal defense side that came in because they're really seeing people that they're in the criminal justice system, but a lot of times it's because of these other civil legal issues that they have that bring them into the criminal justice system. And so there's really an incredible collaboration between the civil and the criminal side of things. And so that's been really impressive and inspiring to me to see the way that all of these different communities are really coming together to tackle problems.
Yeah, that's cool. I think that there's definitely an emerging sort of consciousness raising that the civil criminal divide is super artificial. That people are people and that our needs have tentacles in a lot of different areas, and that if we're going to successfully attack them, we can't be so siloed. So I think that's a great concept that's holding for. So let's talk more about you. Tell us a little bit about your role as pro bono counsel at the firm and how you spend your time.
Sure. Well, this question reminds me of this great diagram I saw recently, and I hope I can explain it properly without a visual. But there's these sort of three large circles with a very small intersection in the middle, and one said something like, what I want to do today, and another said something like, what other people want me to do today, and another was, something about what really had to get done, and in the center was this tiny amount about what I actually did today. And I love that diagram because that's how I feel. I come in every day with a very long list, and I'm working hard all day, but not necessarily getting everything that I had intended to do done. And I don't know if that fully answers the question. But as far as how I spend my time and what I do, there's no 2 days that are the same. Lately, I've been spending a good part of my day, I'd say, recruiting attorneys. There's just so many needs, and we've had a lot of new programs in the city, and so just trying to get people to training sessions, coming up with new projects, and also a lot lately working with our corporate clients to help them. There's a lot of big corporations here, and the legal departments are really wanting to get more involved, and so I've been working on partnerships and trying to help them as well as our own attorneys. So those are probably just some of the things I've been doing recently. If you asked me this question a few months back, I would probably say surveys, statistics, and my annual report.
Yep. So everything's seasonal and things percolate to the top of the to-do list at different times of the year. If our bubble diagrams were a little different and there was one bucket for, you have more time suddenly and you could spend more time doing something, what would that be? How would you spend extra time if you had it?
If I had more time, I would probably do more legal work directly. It is a part of what I do, mostly in a supervisory capacity, but I would love to dive deeper into personal representation. I think that's something that I would like to do. Another thing is, I'm flying in so many different directions, and we have a large firm. We have about 1,000 attorneys. And so while I really want to have a handle on what is happening in all of our pro bono matters across the firm, it's just not possible with the amount of time. And so I think if I had more time, I would really want to talk to people about what they're doing and make sure that I'm more current so I could help them manage the pro bono matters and, manage the program a little bit more directly in that way. I love it when teams call me and they send me documents and I can read them and I can really be part of what they're doing, and it's just not possible to do that all the time.
I think that's such an amazing observation and such a great answer, and I think it's something that a lot of people in these roles struggle with, which is sort of their own pro bono docket or some sort of practice that they're doing, and management and administration. And they're both full-time jobs. So, where in the pendulum does the balance lay? And it's different for different people with different priorities and different situations. But that's a really interesting way to spend more time. I think that highlights a really common balance and struggle that people have.
I do think it is a common struggle just from talking to my colleagues. Some firms have a number of people running the pro bono department, so they might have a pro bono counsel or pro bono partner who's doing more legal work and somebody else who's more on the administrative side. I think that's nice when you can divide the duties a little bit. Although we have a very large firm, it's really just me that's running everything. And so I do feel that I'm sort of doing everything from top to bottom. And so it is a constant balancing act.
So that's a good segue. In some magical universe where you had unlimited time and maybe more help, what would you personally wish you could be doing less of?
Surveys.
Surveys, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many different surveys, and they all ask things in different ways. And, I know it's important. It's important to know what people are doing and how much legal work they're providing and in what areas. So I don't have a problem with the concept of them. It's just that's probably something I would want to spend a little less time with. And also statistics.
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time working with finance and what are our numbers and how are we doing. And again, it's something that's important, but I just like diving deep into the substance. And so if I could spend a little less time doing those things, I would.
What do you enjoy most about your work?
Well, I enjoy a lot of things. I guess what I would say is that I really get my energy from other people and from feeling like I'm part of something. I've just always been this way. And so when I'm really able to connect with different people, and the thing that I love about this job is I am always out there, whether I'm talking to our attorneys or staff or people in the pro bono community or my colleagues at other firms, just the collaboration and being out there working with other people and feeling like this isn't just a job, like we're really all in this together. And I feel like I have a responsibility to get our attorneys great opportunities and make them better lawyers and have them feel that, they want to be more engaged in helping others. And so I just really enjoy sort of being out there working with people, getting them committed. And I especially enjoy when I see the fruits of our labor. When we have a project that's successful or we hear from a client just how much we help them, then that really makes me feel like even with all the administrative stuff that we do, that it's worthwhile.
Well, I think that's a really energizing answer. And it's a nice segue into what I wanted to ask you next, which, since you talked about connections and earlier you talked about spending time introducing your lawyers and other professionals to new projects and getting training and new matters. But what do you think works best at the firm to incentivize and encourage your people to do pro bono work?
That's a great question. And that's actually something that I spend quite a bit of time thinking about. And I actually remember there was a great session at one of the PDI annual seminars, and I can't remember the name, but it was a guy talking about the lawyer brain and helping us understand sort of lawyers and how they operate and what really motivates people to do them. Do you remember which I'm talking about?
Yes, his name is Dr. Larry Richard. He's amazing, right. And his consulting company is called Lawyer Brain, and we'll push out some links and tweets and other ways to find him for more information when we air this episode. But yeah, he's an amazing resource. He's a lawyer and a PhD in psychology, and he just spends time studying the lawyer personality, and he gave us a lot of insights and nuggets. Yeah.
He did, and that's something that really stuck with me. I found it so fascinating, and I've tried to incorporate some of what he said and to toy with different tactics, because the thing I found is, right, it's not the same thing that works for everyone. There's not like one way that I can say this is the best way to incentivize lawyers, because they're motivated in different ways. I mean, recently with the election, I had people coming out of the woodwork saying, I want to do something. How can I get involved? And so, clearly just what was happening in the country was motivating to them. And there's nothing I did personally. It was just sort of seeing what was happening in the world. I think sometimes just seeing what's happening in the world and letting people know that there is a concrete way that you can help through pro bono legal service, that's a way to motivate people. Sometimes I mentioned before working with corporate clients, and I think sometimes the ability to bond more with those clients is motivating, but I think that's probably a smaller percentage. Most of the time, I think the best way to incentivize people, I find, is to make a personal connection and to figure out what does that person want to do. What motivates that specific person in terms of what kind of work they want to do, how much time they have. And so when I actually have the time to really get to know people and to think, just this very personal matchmaking, that's the best way that I can get people to do stuff. Because I'll say, I was thinking about you and this project, I think this would be perfect for you, and here's why. I think it's a lot harder for people to say no to that. Unfortunately, with 1,000 lawyers,
right.
I can't always do that level of matchmaking and personal connections. But I do feel that when I can do that, that's the best way that I can motivate people to get involved.
Yeah, the most effective, but the most time-consuming. I'm just curious about this. Have you noticed any differences in sort of what's effective, or maybe it's effective because it's what that cohort of lawyers are looking for? Have you noticed any difference based on sort of age, what kind of first and second year associates are looking for now? And is that different than what younger associates were looking for, 5 years ago? Have you seen any differences over time, or is it reasonably steady? And sometimes it's outside influences, like you mentioned, the election happens, and then your job is to channel this motivation into good projects and good outcomes. Have you seen any evolution there?
That's another really good question, and I have. My answer is I definitely have noticed a difference over the years. There has been, from what I can tell, there's been an increasing focus in law schools on social justice and on pro bono and access to justice issues. And so what I see is when the summer associates are coming to us, they more often than not are involved with things in their law school. And I don't remember when I went to, well, I do remember when I went to law school, but it was a very long time ago. But I don't remember at that time ever feeling like it was out there and it was around and it was easy to get involved. And so, I could just focus on my classes. And I'm sure there were some people doing it, but I don't think there was the focus that there is today. So right now, for example, last week and this week, I'm giving presentations to our summer associates. And I always start off by saying, tell me what you're doing, because I want to know where they're coming from. And usually 3/4 of the room are involved in something in their law school, at least. And so that's a big difference. And so I feel like it's easier to capture people when they're summers and when they're coming in as first years. And like I said before, that's what happened to me. I mean, I was a first year and somebody said, hey, will you come do this? And I think when you're a new lawyer, part of it is this increasing focus now on just getting involved. And so I think it's something that they expect. But part of it is when you're a new lawyer, you're not afraid. You don't know anything. So whether you're doing pro bono or you're doing something in your practice area, it almost doesn't matter. I think it gets more and more challenging as lawyers get more set in their practice area and in what they're doing. They're more scared to get out of what they're doing. And so I think for a variety of reasons, getting people at the beginning is important, but definitely I've noticed that that's something that seems to be more important with every passing year.
Oh, thank you. Those are great observations. Just quick tangent while we're talking about summer associates and it's summer associate season. What advice do you generally have for law students and lawyers who are just starting their careers?
Well, I do have advice that I've been giving in these presentations right now, and this is advice that I typically do give to new lawyers, both summers and incoming. And that advice is to be proactive about your career. I think that this is one of the most important things that a young lawyer can do. And what I tell them is, whether it's pro bono or whether it's something else, don't sit in your office and wait for someone to come knock on the door and ask you to help on a project. really think about what kind of lawyer you want to be and what kind of work you want to do and what do you want to be known for, and who do you want to work with. And so I try to give them examples. Are there particular lawyers in this firm that you really want to work with that maybe you're not going to get an opportunity, or is there something that you maybe want to get known for? I mean, I've seen first-year lawyers be the go-to people for subject areas in the firm because they develop expertise through pro bono. So that's my biggest piece of advice, is to be proactive in your regular work and in your pro bono work. And I think that when you do that, your career is so much more satisfying because you don't feel that it's happening to you. You're in control of it, and that makes you so much more motivated to do the work that you're doing, whether it's putting in extra hours or what have you.
I confess, I share very similar points with people, and I call it there's no prince or princess charming like coming to save you. You gotta own this. It's your life. It's your career. And I think particularly compared to, Bleep years ago when I was coming up, it's just really different. And you can't be a passive vessel, and you wouldn't be happy if you were, in any event. So thank you. I feel like we're very in sync. So those are great advice. It's actually great advice for young lawyers, and it's also great advice just for anybody at any time in their careers, in any setting. So it's incredibly transferable.
That's a good point. I mean, maybe you're not a young lawyer, but maybe you're feeling like you want to change, or that you're sort of not in control of your career and where it's going, and to take a step back and to think about that. That's good. Maybe I'll have to use that when I'm trying to motivate some of our partners and more senior lawyers. To maybe I'll have to give them some of the same advice I give to the younger lawyers.
I think it's true because I think people at a certain stage feel stuck in a different way. It's all the same and slightly different. So I think it's good advice for whatever setting we're finding ourselves. So
I'll have to make a note of that. This has been good.
Yeah, let's do it. I want to shift gears a little bit. You have published an amazing pro bono annual report for last year, 2016. It's fantastic. There's a wonderful message from the firm-wide managing partner and also a message from you. You wrote in part that if you believe that home is where the heart is, then our 2016 pro bono annual report leads with its heart. When looking at our work in the past year, we were struck by a common pursuit among nearly all of our pro bono clients, the search for home in all of its physical and emotional meanings. So I wanted to talk to you about this theme, the search for a home, how you came up with it, and what it means to as you were writing it and developing this, because I think it's incredibly powerful.
Well, thank you. I'm very proud of this report. And I mean, of course, it's a collaborative effort. I mean, I love just the way it looks, and that's all, our design people and not me. And, we had some great people in the marketing department that really helped us. So I do want to give them, credit. But what I would say is, every year, I sit down and start to think about what did we do over the year, and are there some common themes that we can pull out. And when this theme first emerged, this theme about home, it was actually because I was looking and found that we had a lot of matters that were relating to housing. And, we were doing work to help low-income tenants living in uninhabitable conditions or facing eviction, working with nonprofits to build more low-income housing, some, systemic work to combat homelessness and the criminalization of homelessness. And so this theme of home initially came about because I was just seeing so much work we were doing specifically about homes and housing. And then in January, the president issued his executive orders and the travel ban, including the Muslim travel ban, and suddenly everything was about immigration. And we did a lot of immigration work last year, so I easily could have picked that as a theme. But suddenly we were doing all this work about immigration, and so while the focus was not new, we started thinking about home in a different way. And what really does home mean? And for immigrants, home it's about a country, right? It's maybe they're leaving their home country and they're trying to stay here because this is their new home. And so whether home is actually a new safe housing environment or being safe in your environment free from domestic violence, or being in a home country, like it all kind of fit together. And so I think it was a combination. It sort of evolved, even though it was the same theme, it kind of evolved in terms of how we were looking at it.
Yeah, I loved going from sort of the literal to a more figurative, and as you say, in all its physical and emotional meanings, because they say, home is where they have to take you, home is where your family is, home is where you feel safe. So it's very like sort of shelter, security, and what all that means, and how that lends itself to pro bono service. It's very poetic. I love bringing the poetry back to pro bono. So I love that idea. And a bit later, you used a quote from Elie Wiesel: "There may be times when we are powerless to prevent injustice, but there must never be a time when we fail to protest." And I feel like that really speaks to the moment. Tell us a little bit about how you chose that.
Sure. Well, if you look at our pro bono annual reports over the years, I always put a quote at the beginning. I'm a quote collector.
Yep.
That's kind of my thing. So whenever I hear or read or, some kind of moving or inspirational quote, I add it to my running list of quotes. And so I actually had some quotes similar to this. And last year, Elie Wiesel passed away. And I really spent some time thinking about him. He was just such an influential and, motivating person. He was a Holocaust survivor. He had devoted his life to fighting indifference, intolerance, injustice, all of these different things. And so I started collecting some quotes from him because just, thinking about him a lot. And this concept here, we can't always prevent bad things from happening. In fact, a lot of the times we can't prevent bad things from happening, but that doesn't mean that we can't try to prevent them from happening. And when they do happen, that we can't step in and say something and do something. And so I just think there's a lot of different quotes you could find. I mean, like I said, Elie Wiesel was particularly meaningful to me, but I just think this is an important idea, is that we have to stand up for what we believe in and for our rights, and whether that's civil rights or, whatever it is, it's really important. And we've certainly seen a lot of protests in the past year. And so I think a lot of people really feel this, that it's important, and it's a way to feel empowered by stepping up and talking about what you believe in and doing pro bono work to help.
Yeah, it's a timeless message, but it also seems incredibly current at this moment. So it's a great selection for any number of reasons. While we're talking about quotes, I wanted to try and play a quick word association game. So, for example, if someone asked me what pops into my head when you would say Perkins Coie, I'd probably say Leah Medway, since that's who I know who works there.
Okay.
Or maybe I would say counsel to great companies, because that's the tagline, and I've been reading it a lot as I've been getting ready to talk to you. So another shout out to your marketing department in addition to the annual report. But let's see what you would say. What comes immediately to your mind when I say Perkins Coie?
Culture. That's a big thing at Perkins Coie. We recently celebrated our 100th anniversary. The firm's been around a long time, and another tagline, which you don't see as much in the website, is kind of the firm's the thing. And really there is even though we've become this large national law firm, we've grown quite a bit over the 8 years that I've been at the firm, and the firm is focused on excellent legal service and innovation, and just striving to be the best. But at the same time, they really care about maintaining our culture and what it means to be here. And I know the firm is incredibly proud of, regularly being on the best places to work list, and, just making sure that people are happy here and that they feel invested in the firm. And so I will say that I have worked at quite a few law firms over the years. I was as a paralegal, as a corporate attorney at a couple law firms in the pro bono sphere. And, of all the places that I've worked, Perkins is without a doubt the best environment, in that sense that I've experienced.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing. So this is sort of a two-part question I'd like to talk about next. So it's a lot of table setting.
Okay.
But I wanted you to tell us about Sara Kruzan. And the reason that I'm interested in her is that I am a big fan of a short film that the firm produced. It's sort of a 10, 11-minute documentary short called The Chance for a New Life, the Sara Kruzan Story. And we'll tweet it out and provide links, but it's very easy to find. And I am such a fan of this piece. I have it bookmarked, and I watch it when I need some inspiration. I mean, it's tough stuff. Usually I watch it with some Kleenex, but it's so inspiring. I feel like fired up and ready to go. When you need a little like kick in the gut to kind of feel alive and motivated. This is one in my toolbox, of kind of go-to pieces. So
I love that. I will definitely tell the guy that did it, Matteo, that he did a great job.
Oh, it's amazing. So my question and now the floor will be to you to tell us about her and the firm's involvement. And part two is, how'd you make a movie about it? We do a lot of amazing work. Firms have amazing, inspiring stories, but they don't all see the light of day into video. So I'm curious, not only about the meat of the matter and the heart of the representation and the substance of it, but I'm really curious how this video got made.
I would be happy to talk about both of those things. My reaction to Sara is honestly pretty similar to yours. I think she's an amazing woman, and she is really inspirational to me, and really one of the most powerful cases that I can think of that we've handled at my time at the firm. Sara is a woman that had a tough upbringing. I mean, she was really not in a good situation when she was younger. She found herself involved with a older man who ended up trafficking her as a prostitute, and when she was 13. I mean, she really had a very tragic upbringing, and ultimately she ended up killing him, her pimp, and she was about 16, I think, when that happened, and she ended up being sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. And of course, there's been a lot over the years. I mean, there's been a lot, of litigation and emphasis on juveniles and how their brains work and how it's really inhumane to sentence them to life without possibility of parole. But, at the time, this is what happened. This was in California. And our firm got involved because it was quite a long time ago. I mean, we started this when I came to the firm back in 2009, so it was probably a little bit before that. And the case was brought to us, and it was a partnership that we worked with a couple of different people. And our goal, Sara at that time had spent, more than half her life in prison, and she was a model prisoner. She got her degree, she won awards. I mean, she was truly inspirational in prison, and she accepted what she did, and she accepted responsibility, and that was wrong. But what was really sad was that they didn't allow any mitigating evidence. The idea that when you're in an abusive situation and that may lead you to commit a crime, that whole concept wasn't introduced at trial, and she really didn't get a fair shake. And so we had a cross-office team out of our Los Angeles and Seattle offices that worked for years on Sara's behalf. And ultimately, they were able to get her sentence commuted to get rid of the without possibility of parole. And so her sentence was commuted by Governor Schwarzenegger right towards the end of his term. And then, but we kept with it. We kept on going. Our team worked incredibly hard, and ultimately they were able to get her out of prison on parole. And it's actually timely that you asked this question, because I just learned that, she's now met all of her provisions for parole to be over. I mean, this is somebody that we were working with for such a long time, and she's just really become inspirational. And since getting out of prison, I mean, she's become a public speaker. We flew her up here to speak with all of our attorneys, and not just our attorneys, but her story has really spoken to the staff at our firm. And for years, even though we were doing tons of other cases, everybody wanted to know, how's Sara? What's going on with Sara? When are we getting Sara out of prison? And then, so it was amazing. And, she came up here and spoke, and I mean, we had, standing room only, and our staff were hugging her and people were crying. I mean, it's really been this incredible journey, I think, for our entire firm along with Sara. And as far as the video was concerned that you mentioned, we generally every year we have a partner planning conference. All of our partners from across the country get together, and I started working with our marketing department because I wanted to have some, either live speaking or video presentations. And really, we decided that what would be more powerful than a bunch of lawyers talking about, I did this on my case, this is what it meant to me, that we really wanted to tell a specific story to show the real impact of pro bono work and how it can literally help change somebody's life, and not just somebody's life. I mean, our work for Sara really led to some systemic change, in California. It didn't just help Sara, but it helped lead to changes in how juveniles, were sentenced. And so we decided to do a video focused on her and her story. And I mean, that's how it came about. It wasn't meant to be, it was really focused on just internally, but it came out so well. I mean, it was such an amazing video that we wanted to share it with the world, really. And I remember sitting at that pro bono, the partner planning conference, when they showed the video, and you talked about the Kleenex. The tears were flowing all around me, and it was, everybody said, you're trying to make me feel guilty that I'm going to do pro bono, but really it was just, I think it's just such an inspiring story to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it is goosebump stuff. So I think it's just amazing. The firm's work was amazing, and she's amazing. And so sharing the story together, I think, it's just dynamite stuff. So thank you for telling us about it, a little behind the scenes. And it's totally worth 11 minutes of people's time. I think they'll never forget it.
Yeah, well, thank you. I would encourage anybody to look at it. I think, not every pro bono case is that way. I mean, I wish we had, I don't wish there were more Sara Kruzans in terms of what happened to her and the experience she had, but I wish, that every case was like that, just in terms of having a client that's so grateful and so sympathetic, and, they just have been so wronged by the justice system, and the ability to come in and do that and change. And so it's a great example of when everything goes right, the power of pro bono.
In addition to Sara, could you share another example of pro bono cases that have been particularly meaningful to you for whatever reason?
Yeah, I think obviously Sara's case was meaningful, but there's so many different things that we've done. When you work personally on a case, you get to know that client and you become invested in a different sort of way. And so I think it's hard not to bring a certain kind of meaning from work that you've done. And one client that really sticks with me is actually one of the first clients I worked with when I came here to the firm. And the case was referred by Kids in Need of Defense, or KIND, and we actually house KIND in our office here in Seattle, so we have a really close relationship, and we've done a lot of work with them over the years. And this was a young girl from Mexico who was seeking a U visa, which is a visa for victims of crime. And she had been brought to the U.S. at a young age by her mom, who then took up with a pretty bad guy, and she was living with him, and he was essentially her stepfather. And he abused her for years, and probably when she was about 13, and ultimately she got pregnant. And it was just a horrible situation that she was in, but she was so sweet, and she was so kind, and she was such a great mom, and she was just like really just coming from a bad situation and turning it around. I guess a bit like Sara, but different situation, of course. And so I worked for her and was able to get her U visa, and that allowed her to stay here and not worry about being deported, because one of the things, of course, when she was being abused was, if you tell anybody, we're going to deport you back to Mexico, right, where she has no family and no friends, and she didn't know anybody, and so we were able to get her status, and she could get a job and really support her daughter and just get out of that situation. And I've over the years I've seen her, and she's really just doing amazing. And so that case had a lot of meaning for me, just seeing that even if it's a small case, even if it's just a small individual case for somebody, how that can really change them and the trajectory of their life. So that was pretty meaningful for me personally.
It's also amazing how resilient people are, right? That just the perspective that it gives us in terms of the crazy things that people go through in their lives, crazy, awful, and the sort of ability to overcome, even with some help, but still, it's inspiring, I think.
It's really amazing. I mean, actually, that's something I've seen time and again. We've also done a lot of work for Holocaust survivors, and I'm amazed at some of my survivor clients, because I've done a lot of that work directly as well. And I'm like, you just grew up in the worst possible situation. I mean, you and your family was killed, and you were forced into ghettos and sometimes concentration camps, and, fleeing with absolutely nothing. And you're this sort of happy, positive person. And how do you come from such a terrible situation and, come out of that, sort of, I mean, obviously scarred to some degree, but so positive. And I think it's a lesson for all of us. And I think that's why a lot of people do pro bono. They learn a lot from their clients too, and that can make you feel really inspired.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful point. Before we move on, did you have anything else to add about sort of meaningful experiences? I know it's like picking which child you like the most. It's like you could just...
I love them both.
Yeah, hours and hours and hours. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, another case that I guess I would mention that sort of struck me, but for a very different reason, is sort of more on the more systemic side. It was a case that we did here in Washington. It was the Wilbur case, and it was against two cities here in Washington. And the case was about public defense, and it was really pretty incredible what was happening. There was a city in Washington where there were two half-time public defenders who had a caseload of like 1,000 people, and so obviously they were not able to really do what they needed to do for those people. And it became evident that, this was not just a problem in these cities and not just a problem in Washington, but really across the country. And that case was pretty incredible because through that case, we were able to make change to how the public defense system worked in Washington, but it also had a national impact, and it's been cited as being influential in a number of other cases across the country. And so, we talked a bit at the beginning about just the intersection with criminal and civil, and so this case, it wasn't just about one person in the way, that Sara or this other case I talked about, but it's really showing that you can have real systemic change, just through one piece of impact litigation. And our attorneys did a great job, and I think it was really groundbreaking in terms of how public defense is looked at and how it's changed here and how it is changing across the country. And obviously there's a long way to go. You don't just have one case and everything changes, but that's a case I think about a lot, just in terms of the systemic role, what we can really do to make change at that level.
Those are such complimentary answers, and I think they demonstrate the depth and breadth of law firm pro bono, right? That the power to change a life and the power to change the system, and that they are both valuable and both needed. And those are really helpful to painting a very complete and full picture. So fantastic examples. Thank you so much. So a little outside the box here, Leah, but if you had a magic wand, what would you change about pro bono or access to justice?
Oh, well, I would love to have a magic wand. Do you have one?
We'll put it in the mail. No, we don't. But
yeah. Well, that's a good question because there are quite a few things that I would probably want to change. But top of mind, I would say, is that I would love to see a right to counsel across the country for children and for immigrants and survivors of domestic violence. Really everybody, I suppose, if the wand is magic, but a lot of the things that we've talked about here and a lot of the problems in terms of access to justice there is not a right to counsel. There is in criminal, but not necessarily in civil cases. And, for example, in the immigration context, there is not a right to counsel. And so you've got immigrants that are facing deportation, to countries where, they might be facing serious persecution or death, and they can't even, they don't necessarily have a lawyer. It's scary for us lawyers to go into court. I just can't only imagine how scary it's for somebody who's a child, or somebody that's been abused and has to stand there in court with their abuser, who's usually lawyered up, and they aren't, or somebody who's not familiar with the language. And so, I suppose if I had this magic wand and I did create this right to counsel, I would simultaneously need to create more pro bono lawyers to fill that need. Yeah. But that's what I think I would say top of mind.
Oh, I think those are great. And also a great education piece because, due to our civic education or lack thereof, plus people doing nothing but watching Law and Order and, getting their education from crime shows, people don't understand this. They do not know that really, really significant things can happen to you and you have no right to a lawyer. And our whole system is so hard and complicated that it's premised on people having lawyers, not individuals being able to figure it out and help themselves. So those are
the statistics bear it out. I mean, I think in the immigration context, that at least some of the numbers I've heard are that that you're 4 times more likely to be successful if you have a lawyer. And I this is something I say to lawyers a lot when they say, well, but I don't have expertise in this, and I tell them, well, look, first of all, we're not going to put you in a situation where you don't have some guidance. So, if you don't have the expertise, obviously we're going to be partnering with people who are going to give you that mentorship. But just having a lawyer next to you who can present your case. I mean, if you don't have a winning case, you don't have a winning case, but how are you supposed to even get to that point of seeing that if you don't have somebody to present it for you when you can't present it for yourself? And so I do think that's a really central thing that would be great to see more people have.
Great point. So, Leah, let's end with this. Who are your pro bono role models and why?
So many of my counterparts are truly inspirational to me. So, and I take different things away from different people. So there are probably a lot of people I could talk about, but I will say that my biggest role model, and it's an easy one, is Lisa Dewey at DLA Piper. When I started my pro bono career, I had been a corporate lawyer at a couple of different firms, and I ended up making a real career shift. And I was the number 2 person. I was the pro bono manager working with Lisa. And, now there's sort of she's got an empire, of people at that firm. I mean, they really are, the gold standard for pro bono. And people are sometimes very surprised to hear that, because they think of DLA Piper and how many people they have in the pro bono department. But at the time, it was just me and Lisa. And she is really the person, she was my mentor in this profession. And I just learned so much working from her. And she just has this amazing ability to be, at the same time, this incredibly friendly and kind person who you just like and you want to talk to. And but at the same time, just really tough and good at fighting for what she believes in. And when you look at the program that she's created at that firm and the impact that it's had literally across the world, it's really inspiring. And at the same time, when you meet her, if you didn't know her, you would have probably envisioned her being somebody different. And then you meet her, and she's just so amazing and friendly. And I just really learned so much working from her. And so she has been from the beginning and continues to be a role model for me.
Oh, thank you for sharing. We are also big fans of Lisa's, so it's a delight to talk to her. And Leah, it is a delight to talk with you. Thank you so much for speaking with me today. It's been a pleasure and very inspiring.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much to Leah for making the time to be with us. Our special thanks and best wishes this week go out to David Lipscomb. You may know him as Producer Dave. After many years at PBI, Dave has moved on to pursue his passion for urban planning. Dave was a founder of the pod, and it's no overstatement to say that we couldn't have created the Pro Bono Happy Hour without him. His talents and expertise with audio and recording were one of the reasons we dreamt up having a podcast in the first place. If you go back to some of our very first episodes, you'll hear him taking his turn at the mic and hosting. He did it all for us, and we are so grateful. Good luck, Dave. Your legacy will live on iTunes for a long, long time. And an enthusiastic welcome to producer Misha, who is now steering the ship with her grace and good cheer. We're excited to embark on this new adventure together. Hey listeners, we'd love to hear from you. Send your comments, feedback, and suggestions, and best wishes to Dave. We'll be sure to pass them along for you to probono@probonoinse.org. New and archived episodes of the podcast can be found on iTunes and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And if you're listening on iTunes, please take a moment to leave a review. It's quick and easy to do. We'd appreciate the feedback, and it would help make it easier for other listeners to find the show and expand our conversation about pro bono and access to justice. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Pro Bono Happy Hour.